Hello everyone, my name is Louis. I am one of the co-founders of Spock. I'm here today to take you guys through the platform, explain a little bit about what AI is, what actually happens behind the curtain when you ask your AI assistant a question, give you a few demos on concepts, and I really just want to show you the basics, get you going, so you can build from there, and then once that momentum starts, you'll never look back. You'll forget what a world pre-AI even looked like. So the idea behind today and all the lessons that we'll be doing together is to give you guys an insight and put you on the fast lane, put you on the fast track to really getting AI or turning that tool into something useful for you. So firstly, just to introduce myself, as mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of Spock. So Spock is a general purpose assistant. Similar to a ChatGPT, we just focus very much on businesses, on helping enterprises, and the behind the scenes stuff, the admin heavy stuff. So Spock is very geared towards heavy workflows, big Excel files, big data, etc. But today is not about Spock. Today is about AI and how you can make the most out of AI. So obviously I will be using Spock in all the training moving forward, but if you're using any other assistant, that is perfectly fine. You should be able to follow along, and this should still be incredibly valuable. So we started Spock because we recognized there was a big need to help companies, help individuals use AI, get the most of it, and just take that first step. Now, to introduce myself again, I have mentioned this once or twice, but just to give you guys an idea of who I am, where I've come from, and why I'm even in front of this camera in the first place. I come from quite an academic background with 3 degrees in computer science, business, and law. Everything essentially pointing back towards AI. I thought it was cool before ChatGPT, believe it or not. As a matter of fact, you might find this interesting. One of the papers I wrote in the law degree was actually titled Jurisprudence in an Age of Thinking Machines, which essentially means the science of law in a world of AI. And the premise there was, if AI gets ahead, if the law cannot actually, get ahead of AI, it will never catch up. And we started to see the beginnings of that. Anyway, so I come from quite an academic background with a big focus on AI. I've always had a big passion for education. I had a big tutoring company, which is why it's such a privilege for me to be able to sit here and teach you guys a little bit about what we've learned, how we use AI, and what we do. So ran with a tutoring company focusing on STEM. Thereafter, we started a company called Booked. Incredible story, incredible product, incredible idea. And the whole premise there was, what does the next generation of a book look like? We've had physical, we've had ebook, we've had audiobooks. What does this next generation of a book built on AI look like? We haven't come up with an exact name yet, but the idea was a smart book, a dynamic book, something, a living thing you can kind of consume and that adapts to you essentially. I had the big privilege of being able to live in the US, specifically San Francisco and Silicon Valley, for quite some time. Learned a lot there. Worked with a lot of the big AI companies, the big AI startups. Really understood how they were building the technology, how they were deploying it. And then during that journey, realized that we really need to focus on developing core AI technology, not just in South Africa, for South Africa, but for Africa. Once I got back from the US, we launched Spock. So that's a little bit about me. Enough about that, you won't hear any more. I now want to dive into some of the practical elements we'll be looking at today. The first is, what is AI? I want to keep this as simple as possible. I don't want to get too technical, but I do think it's quite important just to understand what happens behind the scenes when you ask an AI a question. What is this AI thing actually? So firstly, AI is a very fancy word. You can use the word machine learning instead. I can promise you at the next family gathering, you'll look like the smartest person in the room. So machine learning is the actual term, and it just means the ability for machines to learn like humans do. Now, one thing that's really important to know is, I think what many people think of as AI today, a ChatGPT, that's what we call a large language model. That's a very narrow piece of the overall AI field. So There are many other aspects to AI, and maybe we'll touch on one or two of those today. But for now, we're going to be focusing on what we call a large language model. In other words, a ChatGPT or Spock. So what happens when you ask a large language model a question? Why are these things so intelligent? But at the same time, why are they so stupid other times? Why can't they understand these nuances? Why do they make these silly mistakes? So that is what I want to dive in today. And for that, I've got one or two things I want to show you guys. So I'll be presenting my screen here. And the first thing I want to touch on is maybe a misconception many people have, is where they believe when you ask an AI a question or ChatGPT a question, it goes and it thinks about an answer and then shows you that full answer. So that's not what happens. They cannot think at all. It's not a conscious thing. All it is just a lot of mathematics. An LLM, Spock, is basically just a next word predictor on steroids. What that means is, I'm sure all of you had a fancy phone way back when. You remember as you were typing on your keyboard, the next word would show up. That is essentially Spock, just much better. So what it does is, word by word essentially, it's doing math to determine what the most likely next word in that sequence should be. So for the rest of kind of this quick session, I say word. The technical term is actually what we call a token, but don't worry too much about that. We can just refer to it as word. So these AIs move word by word. Now, why are these next word predictors all of a sudden so clever? Why are they so intelligent? Well, that's because in 2017, Google released a paper called Attention is All You Need. Now, that paper introduced two really important concepts. The one is the transformer architecture, and the second is this attention mechanism. Now, I'll touch on both of those in a second. The old way of next word prediction worked in sequence, essentially. So the AI would be able to see the word previously and then make a guess as to what the next word should be. So it reads your sentence kind of in sequence, right? One word at a time. But what these new big AI models can do, and this is as a result of the transformer architecture, instead of reading something in sequence or going through data or words in sequence, it can actually put all of them into parallel, which means it's got full context of everything that's come before. So it reads everything all at once, essentially. That means the transformer architecture essentially gives AI full context of everything related to the work you guys are doing together. So it doesn't just read word by word in sequence, it reads everything all at once. So now we've given the AI context. That's already significantly more useful than the old way of next word prediction. But the next really important concept is this mechanism or the attention mechanism. Now, why this is very important is because it basically gives the AI a smart highlighter. So the AI understands what's important in all of this context it's reading simultaneously or in parallel. What's the most important parts? Because once it goes through and can highlight those, it actually almost changes how the AI answers you, or changes technically the math to change the words it would show you. Now, I know this may sound confusing, and that's why I've got a little picture here that I think would be really useful, and this shows the idea quite well. So, in this example, you can see if I asked an AI a question, where did the boy go? The AI would start answering me and then word by word do math to calculate what the most likely word is to show me to satisfy that question, right? So if I asked, where did the boy go? The most likely first word is the. The most likely second word is boy, because obviously it's essentially referring back to the subject of my question. So the boy went to the. Now the AI, as you can see there, essentially is determining mathematically what's the probability of the most likely next word. Is it cafe, hospital, playground, park, school? As you can see here, it is playground. So if I ask the AI, where did the boy go? It's going to answer me, the boy went to the playground. Now, why that concept of attention is really important is if I add to my question, it's raining outside. Where did the boy go? Now all of a sudden the AI is putting all of that into parallel so it can read my full sentence. It's got full context of what I've asked essentially. And that smart highlighter is working overtime. So obviously it's going to be highlighting it's raining because that's an important piece. That's an important aspect to the question I'm asking. That then changes the math essentially, where the AI would then answer, the boy went to the, but why would it say playground if it's raining outside? So now all of a sudden the weight or the math essentially changes a little bit. So the answer would more likely be cafe. That would be the most likely next word. So I hope that kind of starts putting into context of how these AIs work behind the scenes. When you ask a question, it doesn't first go and think and then show you the full answer. They literally go word by word and mathematically determine what the most likely word is it should show you to satisfy the question you've asked. And that is, in a nutshell, what happens behind the scenes. Now, one thing I do think is important to talk about, because we've kind of lifted moved the curtain, seen behind the scenes, is the concept of garbage in, garbage out is very, very, very relevant when it comes to working with these AIs. Why is that? Well, that's because if I asked, it's raining outside, where did the boy go? And it gives me the same answer. The boy went to the cafe. However, if I added irrelevant stuff before that, like the Springboks are the best rugby team in the world, it's raining outside, where did the boy go? It's not as if the AI can just ignore the first part of what I've said. It puts everything I've given it into parallel. The smart highlighter is going crazy. And then mathematically, word by word, it's answering me. But you start seeing the problem. The AI gets quote unquote confused. What do Springboks have to do with where the boy's going? So the highlighter can maybe make a mistake, it's not highlighting correctly. It's not, the attention mechanism is misfiring, if you will. So basically what happens then is the AI gets confused. It literally gets confused. So the accuracy starts dropping off a cliff. So if I give an AI garbage, irrelevant context, stuff that doesn't matter to what the AI should be answering me, it gets super confused. The accuracy falls off a cliff and the answers will most likely be bad. So it is funny because lots of people sometimes complain about these AIs are hallucinating. That's literally what they're doing. They're literally guessing their way through an answer. It's just now they're super good at it because of the transformer and attention. But the point is, they're still just guessing their way. So an AI can never really be 100% accurate. That's just statistically not likely. It's statistically impossible, essentially. So that's kind of what happens when you give an AI a lot of irrelevant context. It puts it all into parallel, the smart highlighter gets confused, and the answer isn't going to be as accurate as as compared to if you just keep your question concise, to the point, relevant. So garbage in, garbage out. Please, please remember that. I always like to say there's no real such thing as too much relevant context. It will help the AI a lot. But there's very quickly such a thing as too much or irrelevant context. As soon as you put something in there that's irrelevant, it essentially confuses your AI. We call this context poisoning. It really does confuse the AI. So my biggest tip to you for using AI is just click on that new chat button as often as possible. Because one chat, one conversation is what we call essentially the context window. Everything you ask, everything the AI answers you, and that full conversation you're having, every time you ask a subsequent question, everything that's come before it is put into parallel, math is being done, and it's guessing an answer. That's why if you have one super long conversation where you're talking about the weather, friends of yours, family gatherings, a client at work, it's not as if the AI is treating that in isolation. It's putting all of that into parallel, doing math, getting confused, and giving you a bad answer. And that's when you get angry at the stupid AI. But if you just start a new chat every time you talk to a new theme or discuss a new theme or talk about new aspects, the AI is going to be significantly more accurate. I, for example, will have 30, 40, 50 chats a day, but there may be only 2, 3, 4 messages long. So I really keep things short, concise, to the point, and then I'll start a new chat if I'm dealing with something slightly different. Sometimes I understand it's quite unavoidable. You really need the AI to have a lot of context. Then it is fine because it's relevant context. You're having a long conversation. So I hope that sheds a light on why these AIs sometimes seem intelligent, why they sometimes seem very dumb. It largely comes down to that context window or what you have in your chat. If you have irrelevant context, your AIs are going to seem super stupid. So I hope that gives you guys a really good idea of what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe just 2 or 3 more concepts which I think are quite important to know. The first is how are the AI models actually built? What is this thing even? I'm going to try and simplify this as much as possible. It's not technically correct, everything I'm saying, so don't necessarily go and repeat it, but I think it's just a good way to understand how these models are built and what happens. So when we create an AI model, what we do is we essentially take the internet and we just compress it. And then every time you speak to an AI model, it is taking everything it's been trained on, or the internet, and it's answering you based on what it has seen. Therefore, if you ask a question on something personal that's not on the internet, the AI is not going to be able to help you because it hasn't seen that. It hasn't been trained on that. So when these AI models get built, we take the internet, we compress it really small, and you kind of speak to that compressed internet basically. I won't go into kind of the math behind it or what happens there. I think that's just a good way to think about it. That naturally means that AI has inherent bias. I think many people kind of fall into that trap of thinking AI is not biased because it's a machine. That's not true. The internet is obviously very biased. So you will naturally pick up kind of almost the average of the bias of the internet through these AI models. I know many of the big labs are trying to train that out, but it is very, very challenging. So just know that an AI is inherently biased. I think that's one really important topic. And the second one is an AI doesn't know things. It simply is, or it essentially recalls them. It recalls them from everything it's seen in its compressed version on the internet or on the internet when it's been trained initially. So I think that's a really good way to think of AI in simple terms. Just to kind of sum that up again or provide a quick summary. An AI doesn't go think about your question. It doesn't know. It literally takes everything in the chat, everything you're giving it, putting it into parallel. So there's full context of the question. The smart highlighter is highlighting important things. And then it's mathematically word by word showing you an answer which satisfies the question and the full context within context of the conversation. So the AI is just a math machine. Secondly, when we create an AI, when an AI model is trained, you're kind of just compressing the internet. And there's many other topics like adding tool search, allowing an AI to go search on the internet to build its context, etc. But I don't want to speak to that right now. I just want to touch on those basics around what is an LLM, what happens behind the scenes. And I hope it gives you guys an idea and helps you work a little bit more effectively or efficiently with these AI systems.